Okay, so welcome everybody, past, current, and potential owls and TEDx aficionados and journalism enthusiasts, storytelling lovers. My name is Georgi, or George, if it's easier for the foreigners among you. I will be your humble host tonight, and will open and guide this workshop. Hopefully, I can help Professor Kelly and Professor Murphy, even though I'm sure they don't need help, especially from me. This workshop is a collaboration between AUBG Daily and TEDxAUBG. So before we proceed, I would like to thank the club members responsible for organizing this online event. And there will be time for applause later if everything goes smoothly. So guys, be careful. Now, storytelling. What is this? An animal, an alien, a creature of unknown origin? Any guesses? Somebody? We're looking for short answers. You can just unmute and say it. An art.
No. Oh.
Yeah. Somebody, what do you think storytelling is? Don't be shy.
Can I?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, for my in my words, I mean, storytelling for me is just something that you can share it with everybody, and something that you might experience from somewhere else, like for something special that you might be having. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. That it touches upon exactly what I wanted to share with you
Yeah,
guys.
exactly.
So storytelling, what I think storytelling is a gateway to other worlds. It lets you venture beyond your wildest dreams, and you can access mystical realms you never knew existed. Storytelling gives you access to the beautiful minds and exciting experiences of other people, because stories have the power to transport you to kingdoms far, far away, to unknown lands, to distant corners of the universe. And all this while you're sitting comfortably in your chair, or in our case, in front of our screens. But as I said, you're not here to listen to my fairy tales. So without further ado, let me introduce to you our masterful storytellers, Professor Laura Kelly and Jason Murphy. Just applause from me so we don't unmute the mics. A little bit about our amazing guests. I was thinking about what to say about them, and I'll be very, very brief, because sometimes words are not enough. But I can tell you that Professor Kelly, for example, graduated journalism and magazine writing at the University of Florida, and she did her master's in journalism and public affairs in Washington, D.C. And I can also give you details about Professor Murphy and his BA in communications in Ireland, and the fact that he, in 2018, he did his PhD. But in all honesty, what good would that be? That's why I want to share something else very briefly with you. Kelly and Murphy, that's how we, the students call them when we talk about the courses that we take with them. Yeah, they have spectacular storytelling acumen. And I'm not saying this because I'm taking a course with Professor Kelly right now, or because I've taken courses with Professor Murphy. I'm saying this because I truly believe it. And they have helped me find the focus in my stories countless of times. And I'm sure they will help you discover something new tonight. So thank you guys for accepting, the invitation. And now I'm giving the floor to you, and let's see where you take us.
Okie dokie. Thank you, Georgi, for the very kind introduction. Most of you, I think, know myself, Professor Murphy and Professor Kelly. So a little bit about the structure. I think we're going to keep it pretty loose. There's not going to be any presentations, or I wouldn't say any great sort of, this is no Sermon on the Mount. It's not a class. We're going to try and keep it loose. So myself and Professor Kelly, we were chatting about this in the lead up. How do we want to structure? And we thought we'd kind of do a kind of in conversation style. And we're going to focus, I think, on our personal experiences relation to journalism and storytelling, unless, we go there, but that's also fine. So yeah, we're going to stick to our kind of, perhaps bearing in mind that you're all, students or prospective students or soon to graduate or whatever. So we're going to maybe try and put ourselves where we were in your shoes. So like early career journalism storytelling. So we're going to do like a kind of I'm going to ask Professor Kelly some questions. We're going to bat it back and forth, maybe 30, 35 minutes, and then we leave around 20 minutes, 25 minutes or so for questions at the end. Yeah. So let's not waste any time. So I'm going to kick off and ask Laura, Professor Kelly.
Laura.
Laura. Okay. Look, we're talking. The name of the talk is Storytelling and Journalism. Yeah. So I guess my first question to you: do you consider yourself a journalist or a storyteller?
I don't
Be a
think
storyteller.
Okay, you consider yourself a storyteller.
Because of history.
I don't think the two terms are mutually exclusive. I think that journalism is kind of storytelling with a specific purpose, but I really am not a big fan of these genres and divisions, but rather I'm much more interested in finding stories and then coming up with different forms to tell them in, like you are. So you are largely audio, right? Mm-hmm. And I traffic more often in print, although I do audio and visual as well. But what about you? Do you think of yourself as a journalist?
Not so much. I always made my shilling as a producer, but I guess I was always working as a. I mean, I've done lots of different things in the area of audio. I've worked in different places, freelance and commercial and public service and all that stuff. I was always kind of shy of calling myself a journalist, to be honest with you, because I always, a bit like what you were saying, I always felt, at least in my mind, that a journalist was someone hanging around in the courts and chasing political stories. And, you know, when people ask what a journalist is, that's very much the idea. Of course, we know it's so much broader, lifestyle, whatever, it can be lots of things. But I was always a bit queasy about calling myself a journalist. And I like the producer kind of title. Again, I share your view on it. Pigeonholing, but you know, as academics, we love to define stuff. But I always kind of liked the producer thing because it was a bit looser, you know. So if I was producing audio, I could be doing anything, you know. And a lot of that was the bread and butter journalism, but it also gave me scope to do so much else that wasn't just trapped in the wheel of producing content every single day.
You know, when I meet with my journalist friends, because I started out as a newspaper reporter, and I had a reunion with all the people that we had our very first job out of college. And, you know, we're like, what are you doing? What are you doing now? What are you doing? And I said, I teach storytelling. And some of the kind of like very serious journalists were, whoa, like, what is that? Fairy tales, Little Red Riding Hood? So in some ways, there's this, I think, view sometimes of storytelling that it is fluffier, for lack of a better word, lighter, not as serious or important. But I don't see it that way.
Yeah, and I mean, ultimately, journalism, as you said, is kind of storytelling with a purpose. And look, I think a lot of people who are producers will look down on journalists and say that they're just doing the bread and butter stuff, and journalists will look at storytellers or producers and just say, oh, they're doing the airy fairy thing. Let me ask you about your first story that you worked on. And I'm not saying your first story that you even had published or anything, because that's kind of maybe something else, but your first thing that you worked on, when was that? What was it? What attracted you to it?
So like the first thing I worked on, like in a serious way, I was in college, I was in university, and I think I was telling Victoria and Johan about this. I found my college newspaper. It's called The Alligator, and it was a daily. So it was coming out 5 days a week, and I started skipping classes. I cannot recommend this to anyone here, but I started skipping classes and hanging out at the newspaper. Because it felt like that's where my tribe was. And so it's the first time that I really wanted to keep working on my stories and cared what everybody else thought, the other reporters. And we were just, you know, trying to really hold the feet of the administration to the fire. So doing that questioning authority role and finding all the weird stuff in our college town. And I don't remember the specific story, but I remember, yes, I do. It was about the architecture school. They were building an architecture school, and I cared so much about it that I stayed up late into the night. I over-interviewed people, and I just wanted whatever I was doing to just kind of, I don't know, vibrate on the page. I just wanted it to be exciting, and it was. What about you? You have a first story?
I mean, I don't know. The first story that I kind of properly worked on was actually a neighbor of mine. So I tend to find stories wherever I am, you know, like, I mean, people ask, where do you find stories? Like, well, wherever you are, basically.
Yes.
And the first story I worked on is a neighbor of mine. He's dead now. Connie is this old man. I won't tell you too much about him, but like he had this very traditional life. His mother died in childbirth, and so he grew up with a much older father on a farm with no electricity. And they would have like fertilized the fields with seaweed from the beach, like that they brought up with donkeys, and then would have sold the carrots and potatoes and horse and cart. So obviously, okay, from another era, from another century, from another time. Now it's even like 3-4 times ago, because Ireland has changed so much. So I would meet him every day. He used to go to the pub every day. That's where I used to meet him, which is a great place to get stories. Unfortunately, people don't go to the pub anymore with COVID, but whatever. So I just got to know him from being in the pub. And I know that there was a big property boom in Ireland, and he sold his land. So this land that he spent all his life on, like hard labor, tough life, barely ever left this village. And he sold it for like 1.5 million euro. So he became like, overnight, he became like a millionaire, which was ridiculous, right? So this field that he worked in his entire life was nothing but toil, like a fairly tough existence. And next thing, boom, millionaire. So that was a story. And but it didn't change. I guess what I liked about him is that it didn't change his life, you know, one iota.
That's the story, that it didn't change his life.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why I was really interested to see, like, nothing changed, like his same routine. He didn't like knock down his house and buy an SUV. I mean, he didn't drive anyway, but like, or, you know, whatever, go to Tahiti. No, like everything stayed the same, you know? And I thought, like, wow, I mean, that, because, you know, so much of our culture is about like getting success and getting money. And, you know, and then here's a guy, and I like people who, I mean, I think people who create good stories are people who do the unexpected, you know? And sometimes the unexpected is doing nothing. Where, you know, people, and it puzzles me sometimes when I have classes and people seem to have no ideas. Oh, I can't think of anything. I can't think of anything.
Yeah, I feel like I have the opposite problem. I feel like ideas, I sometimes think I'm wearing, all of my clothes are made of steel or magnetics, and ideas are just like pieces of magnets that fly and attach themselves to me. I feel like everywhere I go, stories are screaming. And even if they don't become the kind of stories that you print or publish or make into something in some beautiful form, it just feels like, they're everywhere, you know, from big to small.
When you're okay, so you can see like lots of stories, and we can say they're everywhere essentially. I mean, every trip to the bus station, every trip to the villa, every time you get on the public transport, anything. It's the stories everywhere, but not all of those stories you said are going to be a story. So kind of what are some of the ingredients, or is it a little radar? Is it intuition that you have, or are there kind of things that you think, this separates it from being a story that's quite interesting to, okay, I need to do something about this. This is different.
You know, that's always really interesting to think about, like, how do you build your radar of interestingness, right? How do you, what are your meters, your internal buttons that say beep, 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 interesting, beep, 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 not gonna happen, beep, 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 beep. And with stories, for me, and pretty much with everything, I just move toward whatever is interesting for me. I know we're supposed to think for our readers and think about the people who will listen, but I feel like I am that person. I'm the one making it, but I'm also the one who wants to read it. And so, I don't know, I just listen to what is beeping inside of me in terms of, is this going to make it? Is it not? Is this worth following? I mean, sometimes you have to deal with people, right? You run into obstacles with somebody dies, somebody says no, you get lazy, somebody else does it better than you, and you think, oh, I don't want to do it right now. But I don't know. I feel like we're really lucky because we get to look out into the world and find the weird shit and do stories about it.
Yeah. I mean, look, we teach storytelling in our different ways, and I'm not so sure about you, but I do have like rules. I mean, I always tell people, look, rules are there to be broken. Yeah. But I think it's important, like, and I really firmly believe this, that people understand what the rules are before you break them. Yeah. I mean, I love when I have people come through, as we all have maverick students who just want to completely go their own way, and it's fantastic. You know, I see some of myself in that, but I also feel like it's important to understand the mechanics and to understand the sort of like little principles of storytelling. Like there's a sentence that I use, which people may have heard in my classes, you probably are familiar with it. Somebody does something because, and there's a blank, and that's your, what are they doing? Someone does something because, okay, well, what are they doing? And then, so that's, you can find that everywhere, okay? Someone dances, someone plays instruments, someone travels, someone opens a restaurant, whatever. And then I think what makes that very interesting is when the but comes in, when you have the challenge. So somebody does something because, and then but. So then you have like this extra dimension that really injects life into the story, you know?
Yeah, you have somebody solving a problem. Those are the most interesting situations. Somebody solving something, right? Watching somebody move through something. And the but is like some obstacle or something that you've got to puzzle through or figure out or kick or test or contest. And so it's that pushing against and that surmounting in a way. I don't know if you find this, but I find sometimes students, not just students, I guess like people, when they're trying to form stories, they have topics, but they don't have stories, right?
All the time.
So, and I was thinking about that earlier because you and I were talking about it. And I used to pitch topics. So I used to write for this magazine called Islands, and it covers all the islands in the world. And I was living in Florida. And so I covered the Caribbean. I did a lot of Caribbean stuff for them. So I was down jumping on the islands and looking for stories. And there's a lot of rum produced in the Caribbean. So I came back and I said to my editor, I want to write a story about rum. And she said, what's the story? Rum's a topic. Rum. What about rum? There are a million stories about rum. And I said, I don't know, but I feel like rum is the big topic, which is sort of like the ocean. And I just have to jump in and swim around and see what I can find. So I went back down there and found an old still on the island of Grenada, and some old guy who had worked there his whole life and then sold the recipe to a big corporation that was now kind of taking their family rum recipe and making it into a less than interesting thing. And so I found my story, but I started with the topic because the story was about just what you said, something's happening and then there's something comes in and then they were trying to surmount or overcome it or figure it out.
Do you think you can, I mean, I think I'm consider myself lucky, and I hope I'm not being too immodest to say I've got a good radar for stories. Like I have it. I think, you know, I'm lucky, and I count myself lucky for that. I see things, I hear things, I can recognize things, and straight away it just goes off with me. I just know, like, and I would be able to like see the person or read a short article or whatever, come across something, and within like no time I have the story done, made in my head. I can, you know, project forward. Now, of course, you need to be open that it can go, because you're dealing with people, so it's unpredictable. And the best things that I work on are ones that turn out to be very unpredictable.
Yeah.
Even the unpredictableness, you kind of know you have that like feeling. And I'm wondering if you think, like, what advice you think you can give people to develop this, to develop that radar?
I feel like you have to reclaim your childness in some ways. I really do. A friend of mine has twins, and I was around them the last couple days, and all they were saying, they are 5. Look, 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 look. So they're pointing at weird stuff. They're saying, look. And then they say, why? Why is she like that? Why are you doing this? And I feel like we all started out like that, you know, where the world was this big, juicy thing, like, look, 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 look. And then why is it lightning? Why is the sun coming up? Why is that man so fat? Why does that woman have green hair? But it gets socialized out of us. You know, we learn these notions that it's impolite, or that it's rude, or that's not how you behave like an adult, or you don't want to tell people why, because then you show them you don't know everything. And I feel like it's kind of reclaiming the curiosity and the wondering about the world, the fascination and the delight in the world that has been socialized out of us, beaten out of us by our parents, our societies, our religions, everywhere. And I think it takes a little bit of bravery to become a person that is willing to walk up to a stranger and say, like, why is your hair green? Or look, 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 which could mean that you're staring, right? So all these things we've been told, that's wrong, that's rude. So in some ways, I feel like to be a storyteller, you've got to throw off some of that, and to be an idea magnet. It's that you claim that you're going to be this person of wonder in the world, no matter how embarrassing or awkward or weird that makes you seem. That if you want stories, there's some weirdness involved, maybe. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think you articulated very well. I think like having the wonder, I mean, if there's a word I would have, it's curiosity, you know?
Yeah.
Very, like, that's what kids have, isn't it? A curiosity for the world. And I think that's fundamental. If you don't have that, I think you're on the wrong field. And I think, you know what?
Do you think we're all born with it though? Or is it
I'm sure we are.
Teachers, are we trying to teach people to be curious?
I don't wonder, is that teachable? Can you teach someone to be curious?
I don't know. I wrestle with that all the time. How do you teach somebody to recognize an idea? How do you encourage people to be curious? And I don't know. I don't know.
I mean, I think, you know, fake it till you make it. So I think one of the things that I try and do in class, okay, we listen to work, or we read essays, and then hopefully over time, if you hear enough and you read enough, and I always tell people to imitate.
Yeah.
You know, if you hear something that you like, try and do it again. I mean, I know I've done it in my career. I've imitated voices, and I don't mean like the actual voice. I mean the style of the producer, the type of story. Some stories I've done that have been very successful, have been heavily influenced, shall we say, by some of the greats of journalism. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And I tell people a lot is to steal.
Yeah.
Be like an artist. I mean, look, I think one of the things that we're facing in, I don't know what you think, but I'm increasingly believing that social media is really, really playing havoc with our ability to recognize stories, with our attention spans. And I find that people are having, students, and even myself, I'm trying to cut down, are having difficulty watching or listening or reading long pieces.
Yeah.
And I think that you need, and while I'm all for brevity and TikTok or whatever, but I think if students who are amongst the brightest, the people who at least have the opportunity to get to university, can't engage with serious material, I think we might have Houston, we have a problem. What do you think? Do you find that?
Yeah, I do find that. The thing, with social media is that I'm not interested in their definition of interesting. Mm-hmm. And so that's part of my push against it, is that it commands so much attention that then it sets an idea of what's interesting. And attention is our most precious commodity.
Mhm.
It's the thing that we have, is to give someone our attention. And I feel sometimes as if so much of it is just kind of tossed. And I'll speak for myself. I'll just get sucked into something and
Mhm.
scroll and scroll. And that's the part that feels as if it doesn't nourish the things in us that bring those stories that fascinate us.
Mhm.
You know, you were talking about what can we do? One of the things I do is I try to put my students in the path of possible opportunities where the unexpected will happen.
Mhm.
You know, digital storytelling, the first assignment is always go out and photograph strangers.
Mhm.
And I say that and they all go, ooh. And they usually say, Bulgarians will not do that to us. I'm nervous and this will never work.
Mhm.
And then they come back in a week and it's like, I met the coolest guy and I ran into this person and this old woman gave me cookies and I made this connection. So in some ways, I think, how do we create opportunities or situations where some of that might show up, where you get surprised, you know? And it's not usually in front of a device, I find. It's out in the world where things happen and where there are sounds and smells and strangers.
I mean, strangers, that's the word. I think talking to strangers, isn't it? I mean, it's the art of talking to a stranger.
Yes.
I mean, look, not one of, definitely without doubt for me, the best thing about the work that I've done is the people that I've met. I've interviewed some people for maybe once. Say when I was working as a reporter, I would interview people once and once only. My style was always more, I liked always to go deep. You know, I was never interested in reporting on the council matters. I respect local journalism. It's vital. It's crucial. We should all consume and pay for it. It just wasn't for me. But I always liked getting in deep, you know, and I've many different people that I've interviewed. Maybe the interview lasted 45 minutes, an hour. Complete random strangers. I turn up at their house or wherever I meet them, knock on the door, microphone in your hand, and you're in. You're asking the most personal, incredible questions, sharing this unbelievably powerful moment where it's just two people, two strangers in a room together, no devices, no nothing. And it's absolutely real and it's all there, all present. And I think like there's no greater high I've ever had. And believe me, I've tried some others.
It's like falling in love. It feels like falling in love when you have an interview and a connection with somebody, especially when it's unexpected and it's deep and it's happening. You can physically feel things passing between you. That's what love feels like.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I've come back from interviews and some of my students come back from interviews and they're like, we had such a connection. Something happened. I made a friend. We got close. It's that person to person magic juju where you are equally terrified that things will turn weird or it's too close and you're thrilled at what's happening between you. That's the best.
Yeah, I mean, I think especially post-COVID, the idea now, I mean, I could almost think of nothing better than to spend an hour in a room with a stranger with a microphone. You know, it would be just wonderful. Knocking someone's door. I mean, I was working on a feature last year, which I couldn't finish. And it was one of the guys I had to interview to finish this feature, an old man, he's in his 80s. And since COVID, I haven't been able to get down to interview him. And look, I've had an absolutely amazing experiences doing that and traveling all over the world. But meeting people, young, old, it's incredible. And I think it's a passport to that. Honestly, sometimes what comes out at the end, look, you always try and do the interview justice and create a good piece that reflects that time. But sometimes the piece is almost the afterthought, you know, it's actually what, like, and I think sometimes too, you know, I would say that people want to speak and, you know, some people are maybe, not to be too dramatic, maybe waiting a lifetime for you to ask the questions that you're asking, you know, especially in documentary work, which I've done. quite a lot. You may be talking to someone about the death of someone, or traveling, or leaving a country, leaving home, whatever the case may be. Like you could literally be like the only person that's asked those questions in that way. And the fact that you're a stranger is even better, because then people, they feel they can unburden in a way. And when that happens, it's this exchange of glances, like something is going on, you know, on a very human to human level. Like, when you said it's a bit like falling in love, I think it probably is the only other thing that can come close to that is the intimacy of being in love. And maybe for a little while, that's what it's like.
And people want to be paid attention to. We all do. We want to be heard, right? Mm-hmm. And that's what we give when we interview. We are doing purposeful listening. And I got to tell you, when somebody listens to me, it affirms that I am being seen and possibly understood. And whether it's that kind of interview you do for an hour and you go deep, or if it's those small encounters you have with another human being in daily life. I was in the States this summer, and I was in Miami, and the city was a red zone, and the whole thing was locked down, and you couldn't go to the ocean, and you couldn't do anything. And everyone was very freaked out about COVID. But I got up every morning when the sun came up, and I took a long walk around this neighborhood where I was staying just to keep myself sane. And I'm walking down the street one day, and there's a house, a 3-story house being constructed. And there are guys up there, hammer nails, putting the thing together. And as I walked down the street, I saw something in the street, and I looked down, and it was a dead bird. And I stopped and I bent over it because it was perfect. You know, as sometimes when birds die, their eyes get kind of desiccated. It was perfect, and it looked as if it were asleep on the road. And so I bent over and I touched it, and it was warm, but it was dead. So it had just died. And I'm just staring at it because I'm curious. And why? It's like, what happened to you, little bird? And a guy from the roof of the building that was being constructed came down, and he went, "Hey," and he ran toward me. And we both bent over the bird, and he said, "It's weird, right?" And I said, "Yeah, it's weird." And he said, "I saw it die. I was on the roof, and a big bunch of birds came, and they flew in a circle, and they started making lots of bird noises. And this one just fell down to the ground and on the street. And all the birds landed and stood around it and talked a lot, and then they got quiet and they flew away." And I said, "Whoa."
Cool.
And so we just had this like moment of a person and a person telling a story. And I think what that was is him saying, "Isn't the world weird and interesting?" And I was going, "Yeah, the world is weird and interesting." And then we just went our separate ways. And I see how much I remember that story, because it was this little moment of an encounter with someone, and something happened.
Lovely. Isn't the world weird and interesting?
Yes.
Indeed. Listen, that's about as good as time, I think, is to throw it open to the digital floor. So, Georgi, do you want to coordinate the Q&A, or how, or what?
Yeah, I can do that.
We can.
There was one question, by Katrina. It's related to what you first mentioned, Professor Murphy. Yeah, we can start with that. One more question.
Let's get into the important question. How did he say you fertilize with seaweeds? Aren't they salty? Well, let me tell you about seaweeds. It's the best fertilizer you can get.
Yeah.
Seaweed is full of iodine, protein. The Japanese, there's wakame. Does anybody like wakame salad? Like, wakame is a type of seaweed, and it contains more protein per 100 grams than chicken, I think. Listen, if the Japanese are eating it, it must be good, right? They're onto it. No, so I've got a little vegetable patch. I'm at home in Ireland, and I fertilize it with seaweeds. In the west of Ireland, the land is awful, and they just literally plant the crops directly into the seaweed. It's the best you can get, Katarina Gold. It's the best you can get.
Thank you.
Any other questions on their garden? Anyone else need any gardening advice?
Yeah.
Gardening.
So guys, you can raise your hands. I saw Desi before that. Anastasia wanted to ask something, if I'm not mistaken. I can see your box, but I think you're here. If you're here, you can just proceed and ask your question. If not, Desi.
I mean, she's here, but she isn't unmuted. But anyways, I'm just gonna
Yeah, you can
ask.
go. Yeah.
I wanted to ask both of you, and then whoever else wants to share as well. Both of you are great storytellers, whether it is audio, visual, or text or whatever. But what do you prefer, listening to stories or telling stories?
Ooh.
I'll go first. I'm definitely more of a listener. I don't think I'm a good storyteller. Like, I mean, I do story, like when I sit down and plan a documentary and go talk or research, blah, 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 blah. Yeah. But just when we're kicking it, as we say with friends, I'm usually the quiet one. I like to listen. And I like to ask questions and hear the answers. So I like to kind of poke people. And I think it's what's made me, I think, good at what I do is that I can listen and listen. Sorry, double listen. It's a skill that's in short supply. I mean, let's forget about storytelling and journalism for a second. In life, yeah, having someone to listen to you, a partner, a friend, family, Jesus Christ, someone who will actually listen, put down their phone, listen, ask a question, follow up, and really listen. That's I think I don't know if I would go so far as to say rare, but it's a great compliment. I think it's the least we deserve each other, isn't it, to listen? So for me, I'm a listener. Laura?
I agree with what you said about listening, that it's everything. You know, I have a group, there are 12 of us, and we've been friends since we were in our 20s, and we're still friends now, and we've been with each other throughout the years. And when I look at this group of friends, and I see what everyone has in common, they're all terrific storytellers. I am the worst storyteller among my friends. So they just lay out the stories, and all we do is tell stories and laugh at each other. And so while I think that I can do my share of telling, I also like the listening part, I have to say. And what I like about listening is that if you listen and then you ask a question that's born out of your listening, people are so surprised. They're like, you were paying attention to that? Or nobody's ever asked me that. And then I think, I just did.
Listening is, you know, it's active listening. There's an Irish producer, writer. She's a professor of journalism down in Australia, Siobhan McHugh. And she wrote an article called The Aerobic Art of Listening. And about how not exhausting, but it's tiring. I mean, it's mentally and physically tiring to listen to someone. I think at the end of a conversation, if you've been the one who's been asking the question, listening, if you don't feel somehow, you know, physically exerted, I'm not sure that you were you got to get into it and really, really listen, pay attention, ask questions. And I think more than anything, be quiet, you know. Look, if I could give a piece of advice when you're doing an interview, be quiet, ask the question, be quiet. And also, don't be afraid of silence. You know, listen, I don't want to turn this into a class, but don't be afraid of silence. You know, like when someone's talking and there's a pause and it feels awkward, you know, don't dive in, because it's in that pause, I think, that sometimes people are formulating. Maybe not.
I agree with that, Jason, but I also think it's that sounds beautiful, and I say that to students too. But then I think, so what do you do to navigate the awkwardness? Because it is awkward, I think, sometimes when there's silence. As much as you think, I'm cool with silence, when it happens and you're running the interview, I know sometimes inside my head, I think, should I say something? Should I just wait? Should I look right at them? Should I look at my notes? Should I look out the window? How long should the silence last before it looks like I don't know what I'm doing? So part of it, I think, is wrestling the anxiety dogs in your head, you know?
Yeah, I think flexibility. Yeah, I guess you treat every interview is kind of different, and you prefer for, you know, some people will just not stop talking about nothing. And you just want to get them on topic and you like pull them back, pull them back, pull them back. You have to wrestle the conversation around. Other people, then it's a bit more difficult. Well, I mean, I like about that, you know, I like the flexibility that it requires. I like when I knock on someone's door. Okay, usually you have a follow, you know, you speak with someone on the phone, so everybody's got some idea, but you know, things can be different in person, you know, but I like the unpredictableness of it.
Yeah.
Other questions?
Yeah, we have 3 more people. So first Victoria and then Vicky, let's go.
Okay, hello. First, I want to thank you for this discussion. I think it's been really interesting for most of us to speak from your experience. And in that same line, I wanted to ask both of you, have you ever given up on a story? And what advice would you give, like if we're struggling, is there a point when we should just give up? So yeah, thank you.
Very nice question. Would you like to go first, Laura?
I've given up on stories. Yeah. One time I got too involved with my source and I stopped being able to, it mattered more to me what he thought of things than of my approach to the story. And I decided to stop the story. So that relationship, and it's not like we fell in love, it's just I started to care about him in a way that got in the way. So I chose to stop. I've quit sometimes because it's just been too damn difficult, like too many obstacles have stopped me. And you said, should we ever stop a story? I don't know. I think that's up to you to figure out. But I think if you're stopping because it's hard, you might want to try it again. And here I am. I said I just quit because something was hard. It was hard for a long time, and it started to feel like it was undoable. But I don't know about you, Jason. I'm a big fan of being uncomfortable and of difficulty. I'm usually not interested in things that are easy. They're not interesting. And so I like difficulty and obstacle and puzzling. And I don't know that just came out of nowhere. So I'm yeah. I don't know. There's like teacher meanderings. I don't know.
No. I also enjoy that. I think if I'm in a situation where I feel uncomfortable and I'm doing a story, look, okay, there are levels of discomfort, obviously. But if I feel out of place, I like that feeling. I like being in a situation or being with people that I don't feel fully comfortable with, or we're talking about an area that's very sensitive to one or both or either of us. I like that. And I think that's a rich place to be for everybody concerned. Have I ever stopped the story? I stopped the story recently. I alluded to it. The old man I was supposed to go back and interview. It's a documentary, a feature I was working on about a folk singer from Ireland for about on and off about 2 years. So the short version why I stopped it is that it wasn't turning out to be the piece that I started or that I thought it was going to be. I was working on it with someone and then she didn't. I also got involved with this person in a kind of another, and again, not romantically, but we just getting into each other's lives and heads a bit, and it became a bit unclear. Now, this wasn't integral to the story, but this happens a lot. And it just didn't become, it wasn't clear, you know, and I like things to be clear professionally. I don't mean the story clear. I like when the story is opaque, but like when the person relationships get involved. But anyway, the story in my head, the way it was sounding was not the same as what I planned. And so while it's still a great story, I was not the one to tell it. I'm not the one to tell it. Somebody will tell the story. In fact, the people who commissioned the work have said, or other people want to tell a story, man. Are you going to give it to us or not? I said, maybe better someone else take it. But I would say this, right? If it was 10 years ago and I was in the situation early in my career where you are, I would have finished the story.
Yeah.
No doubt about it. I'll be honest with you now, full disclosure, I've lost my hunger somewhat for finishing and chasing stories. Maybe I can say that I put a lot of time into being a professor, and definitely for me, I don't know about you, Laura, teaching sucks a lot out of me. I don't just mean time, I mean energy. It gives me energy in many ways, and I get inspired working with other people's stories, and I find it creative to teach, actually, and mentor stories. I love that. But from my own work, I know for sure I would have finished this 10 years ago when I had a greater hunger. Now I'm wondering, will it come back? Vesey's asked the question in the chat, how do you deal with writer's creative block? I don't know if it's creative block, it's kind of connected, but I do feel, I would say this for you guys who are younger, you know, like hunger is, for me, I think it's really, I wouldn't say it's everything, but it's so much, you know, like when I was chasing stories and I wanted to prove myself, because I wasn't always in journalism, and I wanted to prove things to myself more than anybody else. Like chasing things is the greatest feeling. And I know if I had that on my lap 10 years or 15 years ago, it would have been done. So that's a very long, convoluted answer. Should you stop stories? Probably. Look, we should all stop stories if they're not good enough. And it's hard to know what. But if I was your age, I'd be very slow to stop something, you know? Like, I'd get it done, you know?
And I want to, Vesey's question about how do you stop creative block? I think you're just talking to yourself, right? A block just means you're trying to figure something out. So it doesn't mean stop. It means go another way, right? If you're blocked trying to get to a friend's house, then you take another path. So if you come up against something and you're just like, I don't know, then circle around in another direction to approach your source or to change your thinking or to read more about whatever you're writing about. That's what I do.
Okay. Victor has a question, then Yuan and Ethan in that order, guys. Victor.
Thank you. So my question will be regarding current times of COVID pandemic. Do you find, I mean, first of all, have you done any stories during quarantine? And follow-up will be, do you find it more exhausting to cooperate and work with people through the screen? You know, even regarding interviewing, you have to stare in the screen all the time to show that you're actually paying attention. It's a little bit harder to be present with a person through digital communication. So yeah, that will be kind of my question. Comment on it. Thank you.
Thanks, Victor. I don't mind taking this one first. I'm not, I have been working on stuff, but I've not done any interviews. I've had people record texts for me, and it's not been great, you know. The audio quality is not good. I can't be there with them. I can't direct them. It's very frustrating. And I know but listen, the world of journalism has not stopped. I listen to BBC Radio quite a lot, and they're still interviewing people. It's still going on. They're doing it, the Zoom thing. The audio quality is not as good, but people are still doing it. So I'm working on stuff, but I've not done anything, produced anything. I need to. Laura?
I have interviewed some people, and it is exhausting, this form of communicating. And Victor, when you talk about staring at people, that's why I switched to audio. Even if I begin with video, I'll say, let's give ourselves a break from staring at each other for a while. Let's switch to audio. And what I have found is that people can sometimes then feel more comfortable. So you're taken off the hook from staring. You can stare wherever you want, but you're giving all of your attention to audio. So you have minus the distraction of the face, and you can just concentrate on what's being said. So I kind of like it. Frankly, I like the switch to audio interviewing, even if you're doing one of these, I need to put the world map in the story and I need to see what your hair is like, gathering those visual details.
Okay, thank you. Yuan, Ethan, and then Sveti. She wrote in the chat.
I have a question for Murphy. You mentioned that you mostly do stories that are local. Have you ever heard the rumor that is like for a faraway country or something? Can you just chase it and went there, or just operate within the area around you?
No, I mean, I've done lots of travel. I've worked in Africa quite a bit, Malawi, South Africa, and Kenya. And a lot of that stuff was kind of funded. You know, I would pitch a story and get a budget and go there. But then when I was there, I would like, oh, stories, absolutely unbelievable. I mean, as well, I think it's great being abroad, being in a foreign country, because I think you're just that little, like 10% more awake. Look, I'm sure you've all traveled and work and travel and live away and stuff. You know, when you're away, your eyes are a tiny bit wider, I think. I mean, I guess I do like local stories, but I think the local is wherever you are. I mean, look, I love where I'm from, and I'm kind of deeply connected to the place. So I like telling the stories about here, but wherever I've been living in different parts of the UK, wherever Bulgaria, I seem to just find the stories a lot. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
I just have a seaweed question for Kelly as well. Was the bird a raven?
No.
No. Okay.
That would have been, yeah, even more interesting. Ethan?
Yeah, I guess my question's for both of you. I wanted to know, what did you guys find that you learned about journalism only after you started teaching it? Like, what information that we don't have access to because we are doers that you guys, I guess, learned once you started teaching journalism or storytelling, I suppose.
Thanks, Ethan. Would you like to go first, Laura?
Great question.
Yeah.
This is all of us being comfortable with silence. For me, there's such a difference between doing something and then explaining to someone else how to think about doing it. So what I found is things that were before kind of instinctual for me, or then everything had to be put through a conscious view so I could break it down and try to talk to young storytellers about how I went about some things that I didn't know how I went about them. I just went about them.
Yeah, they say is methodology, like when you're doing research, methodology is doing something and then figuring out how you did it. I mean, it's a great question, Ethan. I don't know. I mean, I was only saying this today that, look, teaching, you learn a lot when you teach, okay? And I feel that like every semester, like I feel this semester I'm after doing a course on podcasting, sound editing, and communication media society. I'm really like learning as I'm going. And even though some of the stuff that we listen to or read, I've heard like a dozen times, I'm still hearing new things from it. And I think maybe that's it. I mean, I think that actively listening or actively reading, no matter how many times you've heard or read something, like there's in the great works that we're privileged to study, there's so much in them, like, how did I learn? I mean, a bit like you, Laura, you mentioned earlier, you were skipping classes. I dropped out. I was studying radio production at a university in Manchester, and I dropped out because I just wasn't getting what I wanted from the thing. And I was just like, well, why am I here trying to learn how to make stuff? I'm just going to do it. Now, it wasn't a great course and all of that stuff. But yeah, I don't know how I just got into that. But oh yeah, because I was teaching myself by listening. By listening and reading, and I was just like, and it's all there, I mean, listen, you can take these courses and come with us and go to AUBG and you learn enough, but if you're not doing the work yourself, and if you're not passionate about it, and if you're not reading, and if you're not listening, and if you're not actively consuming the stuff that you ultimately one day want to produce, I don't know, it's very difficult to just magic it, and for sure and for certain, you ain't going to learn it in a classroom. Like Werner Herzog, the great filmmakers say, don't go to film school, make a film, get a loan. And I would say one other thing, work bad jobs. I mean, I know for sure working bad jobs has given me the chip in the shoulder that I needed to push through. Anyway, thanks for
Okay. Yeah, nice question. Sveti, it's your turn now.
Thanks, Georgi. I don't have the option for raise the hand, and that's why I texted.
No
Thank
worries.
you for saying it, though. Thank you, Eden, for asking the question, because that was my initial one. However, I got to think of a secondary during the discussion you two had. During these years, we've talked many times about making a story and releasing a story. In many cases, I've heard you both as professors to talk about overcoming the fear of releasing a story and showing it to the person you made it about or who participated in a way. But I've never heard of how exactly you are going through that process. So my question is, how do you feel, or like, how do you deal with the fear of not having the person in front of you being satisfied with the story you made about them, or their feedback overall?
It's a good question also. I mean, I don't know, to be honest with you, it is a big moment when like you share that. I guess you just have to trust yourself. Look, I think if you have a decent ethical compass going into it, you should be all right, If you're doing it for the right, listen, there's a lot of people doing journalism for the wrong reason, producing awful types of journalism. And, I don't need to talk much about it. We all know what I'm talking about. I think if you have a decent ethical core, if you do right by people, and if you represent them fairly and truthfully, and I mean, look, there is an element of representation in this work, isn't there? I mean, it's not, again, I think I said this today, you're not producing a replica of life, it's coming through your head, your filter in and coming out through you. So it's not going to be exactly as they said it or experienced it or whatever, because it's going through you. So from that point of view, it's not going to be the same. I've not had any comebacks. And I just really, really, really I think I just go in with the proper intentions, to represent fairly. And I think, listen, look, touch wood, I've not had someone come back and say that they weren't happy so far. But I think but even, no matter how many times I've done it, it's always like, I hope they like it. Or I hope they don't at least hate it. They may not have to like it, but I just hope I got it right, I just hope that I didn't screw up and misrepresent,
I think what you said is really important, which is, there's this idea that there's the perfect perspective or one truth, and it's no, this is you interpreted through me, right? And but it's hard because I think we have to bear whatever the response is when we've chosen to make something and put it out in the public, which is what storytellers do. It's like, here, everybody look at what I think about this thing. And then I think we have to take whatever they have to say back to us. Either you got it wrong, or thank you very much, or, oh, I didn't really see myself like that. Yeah.
Okay. We have time for one last question because, as I said, deadlines and punctuality is important in the field of journalism. Gary, you raised your hand.
Okay. So I want to say congratulations for this conference, and I want to ask an important question for Laura and for Mr. Murphy. So it's regarding about the history. So about, for example, an historical paper that is like a journal, storyteller historical paper. Can it take too much more time to write about it? And have you written before an interview or like a journal that is related to the history before? Thank you.
Thanks, Gary.
Yeah.
I've done. Yeah. Do you want to go, Laura?
No, go ahead, Jason.
I've done a lot of historical work. One of my best friends, I don't have many friends. My best friend is a librarian and a historian. She lives in the west of Ireland. Me and her worked, I was manager of a community radio station, and she pitched in an idea and I came across my desk. It was like a 10-part dramatic reconstruction based on a piece of legislation, the 1935 Dance Hall Act in Ireland, which was a piece of legislation. Ireland in the 1930s was very poor. It had just become independent about 13 years. And there was like a crisis in the country. There was a lot of illegitimacy. That is like women having babies outside of marriage. And we can't have that, okay, in the 30s. So something had to be done. Now it was a problem, there was poverty. It's a complex problem. Solution was this: 1935 Dance Hall Act banned country house dancing. So a country house dance was when neighbors came over to each other's houses, played music, danced all night. Maybe sometimes there would be a charge on the door, a couple of shillings, whatever the case may be. You people trying to make some money, people came, danced, sang, and spoke the Irish language as one of the contributing factors to the decline of the language. And so the priests essentially who were around the country came up with the idea to ban country house dancing. So you couldn't have more than 3 people in your house. This was like social distancing in rural areas in the 1930s. I mean, this is no television, pretty much no electricity. You can imagine the impact that this had, the cultural devastation. So this woman, an older lady, she's in her 60s now, so how old? This is about 10 years ago, in her 50s, whatever. Older than me, she's not old, older than I. And we just clicked straight away because I just recognized someone who was a pure historian and detail orientated. And so she took a piece of just historical legislation and we made a 10-part series that was part drama, part documentary. We did reconstructions. We went to these old houses. We had musicians playing them. Oh, it was an amazing thing to work on. Listen, history is an incredibly rich place for stories. History is full of stories, and then his stories. Amazing, amazing, amazing. And I think, listen, I always, you know, if students are struggling to find the story out there, well, what about your family? I mean, what's the story of your family, especially in the Balkans or Albania or wherever you're from? It's just unbelievable, the past century alone. So my answer to your question is yes, an emphatic yes from myself.
Yeah, I mean, history is just everything that happened before right now. And so we're usually referring to that in some form in what we write, whether it's context or kind of a line that goes from the past to the present. I know when I was growing up, history was, I always thought that it was one perspective and kind of stodgy and not interesting, and old white guys with hair coming out of their ears were interested in it. But history is just really the past, and the past is really interesting because it informs the present, right? So I think that's the end of my answer.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. We're gonna wrap it up, folks. Before that, Desi asked me in a private chat to say something for 30 seconds. I'm gonna time that. Let me know when you're ready so I can start timing it.
1, 2, 3, go.
Let's go.
On behalf of TEDx, I just wanted to thank you both for joining tonight and doing this meaningful discussion. I wanted to also thank everybody who joined to watch the event, because for me personally, it was very interesting. I hope that for you as well, whether as a storyteller or as a story listener, it was also interesting. But I also really want to thank everybody from AUBG Daily for coming up with this amazing idea and for doing the collaboration with us, because I think that it was really useful and a really nice way to take an hour to just relax. So thank you. I hope that was less than 30 seconds.
It was actually not 37 seconds, but it's okay. You get a free pass. So guys, Desi said what I kind of planned to say. Really thank you for deciding now to spend 1 hour of your Tuesday evening with us. Thank you for the active participation. Thank you, Professor Kelly and Professor Murphy. I hope we can talk more in the near future. And after that, I think that's it. We can leave it on that note. The last question. No need to talk more. If you have any questions, however, I'm sure you can contact Professor Kelly and Professor Murphy. You can contact us, Daily and TEDx, with ideas for future collaborations or anything really. So thank you guys. And unless somebody wants to say something, Professor Kelly or Murphy, but
thank you.
That's it.
Thank you.
Okay.
For having us.
Thank you guys. I wish you a lovely rest of your evening and see you around on campus, hopefully.
Ciao.
Ciao.
Bye guys.